Like they say, marriages are made in heaven, so are these great men who have become world leaders and pioneers in the work by contributing to the world in an unimaginable revolutionary manner. Can we think of our lives without these electronic gadgets or social media portals? These creative minds have taken over the world by a storm and left us to become slaves of their creation. We all are aware of the negative side of all these gadgets, but yet we are hooked onto them, as now they have become necessities for us. I can say that none of you have left your phones behind. As Anita and I said that you can live without your husband and your wife respectively, but you cannot live without your phones and Google and Facebook, because they have become really lifelines in today's world. In the field of medicine, there has been advancement by leaps and bounds. Surgeries which earlier required making large incisions in the body can now be performed laparoscopically. Robotic surgery is again a type of minimal invasive surgery which has become very popular, in which miniaturized surgical instruments that fit through a series of quarter-inch incisions are used. The list of such leaders, achievers and innovators is in different fields of science, medicine, arts, technology is endless, and due to paucity of time, we can only express our gratitude to those who have touched our lives and made it more comfortable and convenient for us to live in this world. I really believe that true leaders are born that way, naturally charismatic, influential and inspiring individuals who are destined to make a mark. But mind you, to be a leader, even if you are born with all these characteristics, you have to work hard to develop and refine your skills. It is important to be able to discover within oneself what you are good at, what your aptitude and inclination is. This discovery should be made at a very initial stage in child growth. The child should not, his thoughts should not be curtailed by or influenced by his parents or his teachers. Parents in today's fast-moving world have to limit their role to guide, support and mold the character of the child and not influence his or her thinking as to what he or she wants to do or should do. I have seen that doctors want their children to become doctors and lawyers want their children to become lawyers, and so with the other professions. A businessman would like to want his son or his daughter to take over and look after his business. In my opinion, these children may or may not grow up to become leaders or innovators, but a child who is permitted and given all encouragement to pursue his passion is more likely to make his parents proud one day for not interfering with his dreams and pursuits. Let them come up with their ideas and creativity. It is ideas that move the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. The three I's: idea, invention and innovation, and the fact that inventions followed by innovation lead to achievement. And thanks for taking us back to Stone Age and the fact that we should not forget that we are not the ones who are innovating in today's day and age. You know, it was the act for survival which actually made us innovate even in those days where we discovered fire accidentally or discovered all those leaves to really cover ourselves. Necessity is the mother of invention, and I think now innovation is a necessity. So with this, I'd like to really call on stage Sarika Bhattacharyya, speaker on diversity and inclusion, and she does a lot of mentorship and leadership. So over to you.
Standing on this podium, first and foremost, thank you, Dr. Harleen, and my esteemed guests, and every one of you. Thank you for taking a time out on Wednesday morning. After hearing all my esteemed guest speakers over here, I'm feeling I'm actually sitting down for my school exam and actually giving a test. Science a boon or a bane? Or are we going to talk in Hindi? जो हमेशा आता था उस समय. Sharp, abhishap, क्या है ये? And I personally feel that if we just move back of what, if I have to tell myself that 7 years ago I moved to Delhi from Bombay. I was a banker at that point of time. job, and my first reaction, or my parents' reaction, or anyone, I was moving alone with a kid because my husband hadn't got the transfer yet. And the first reaction my parents or my spouse or anyone close ones had, what are you going to do in Delhi? How will you travel? It's so unsafe. And I was like, no, I'll have a car. And I don't know how to drive. I somehow or the other, I know how to drive, but I never liked driving. And that was one of bigger reaction at that point of time, that in case if your driver doesn't turn up, how will you get cabs? It's not like Bombay where you can have a hailed-on cabs kind of a thing. Fast forward, today in the morning, my driver actually didn't show up. I take out my iPhone and I look at yes. And I click on Uber. I just see which cars are available. I book it. Within 5 minutes, I'm in a car. Within 40 minutes, I'm here. Without any kind of a stress, tension, or fear. Because when I'm got into the car, there is a message which has gone to my husband already that this is the route I'm taking and this is the car number and the driver number. To say that innovation or invention is not actually disrupting or changing your lifestyle for better, then it's like putting an ostrich head into the sand. It's how we ultimately use it. It's how we integrate it with our lives, with a positive attitude, with an understanding, and how we create ripple effects around us, creating a positive impact is what makes a difference. Just a small example. How many of you have used Nokia in your life? A Nokia phone, remember? Quite a few of you, right? I mean, if you have been born 10, 15 years ago and you had your first mobile phones, you have used it. How many of you have a Nokia phone right now? Not a single. Okay, one hand. 2 hands, 3 hands. I rest my case over here. You might be creating a lot of invention. You might say I was the first mover. It isn't Apple who made the first smartphone. It was Nokia who made the first smartphone. Yes. But the leadership, the team, the organization were just not inclusive enough to accept the fact that there could be a disruption or someone else is going to just do that idea if they ultimately did not want to disrupt their very comfortable position they are in by selling their phones. Similar example is with the Insta camera. Kodak at that point of time had actually developed the first Insta camera. A phone, or basically an app or a camera along with the phone. But they did not launch it because they were much more concerned about the sales of their film rolls, because that was the maximum revenues coming from. They said nobody's going to use this. You know what? People want to see the photographs. They want to keep it in their hands. They don't want to ultimately just have an instant camera and upload it somewhere online kind of a thing. And now we know where we are. How many of you ultimately use rolls, film rolls, cameras? We don't. And they are in some ways quite a bit out of business, both these companies. All the top 10 companies we talk about today, whether it's in terms of market cap, whether it's in terms of market share, the leaders in their industries are the ones who didn't exist 10 years ago. So right now, the economic cycle or the industry cycle has become much, much more shortened. I'm also, my esteemed guest spoke about the auto industry over here, and he spoke about innovation and invention happening in Tata Hitachi. But to be honest, we might not even see auto industry the way we are seeing it today. I know a lot of my cousins who are millennials, recently got married or have just got out of college. I remember when we used to be out of the college, the first thing we used to do was buy a car. It didn't matter if the EMI was equivalent to our salary. But now, I'm seeing they are earning very good money, much, much better income when we used to start working. None of them want to ultimately buy a car. They use Uber, they use Ola, they use a lot of other options which they have, and it is now moving towards a shared economy rather than an own economy. People do not want to use, own assets. They want to basically share this. The same way the future of work is also moving towards that. More and more organizations will find a challenge to attract talent in their own terms and conditions. 5 minutes already over? Oh, that was real fast. Just summing it up in that way, at the end of the day, it's the sharing of the economy, a collaborative economy, and the innovation will move more towards the collaboration piece of it. You look at any ecosystem or any kind of a platform around it. The one example I leave it to it, that how will it impact the way we look at not only our work, but look at life. Today we are talking about driverless cars. I'm just giving you one small example. We are standing on a mountainside road, and at that point of time, there are 3 people on the roadside. The option of the driverless car is they have only one passenger at the back. Either he swerves, the car swerves and goes off the cliff, taking along that one passenger along with it, or actually rolls down those 3 people and they die. What decision the driverless car will take? That's an ethical question which a machine can't do or innovation can't do. That remains with the human. Thank you.
It seems everybody is enjoying speaking and listening because the time seems not enough, but nonetheless we have to go by the clock. So when the bell rings, please ring a bell in your mind to quickly wrap it up. Just to sum our session up, innovations need to be meaningful. They need to be relevant to specifically to the millennials these days, because they treat life very, very differently, and you can figure that out from the kids at home as to how it is. With this, I would like to call on stage Ananya Kejriwal, young Ananya Kejriwal, to share her views on the topic.
Thank you. I'll start by giving you all a short intro on myself and then jump in. So I've spent most of my career in tech, right from places like Microsoft to more recently working at Headspace, which is a leading meditation app that's raised more than $70 million, headquartered in LA. I did my MBA at Harvard, but what really has actually impacted me even more than Harvard, I would say, was my undergrad at Olin College, which is a really small niche engineering school, and that's what I'm going to focus on today, because I think Olin is the best representation of innovation. It's actually formed the crux of my creative design thinking mindset. So Olin was founded because they found that engineers today in America and the rest of the world were lacking, could work really well alone, but were lacking the skill set to work well in teams to solve the most complex problems the world faces today. So they thought the best way to do this was to design an engineering college from the ground up, and recruited about 30 students fresh out of high school to work with faculty, primarily faculty who worked at MIT. And these people spent 6 months designing everything from scratch, what should engineering education look like, what should these classes look like, and then they spent the next 6 months actually experiencing that education to see what the gaps were, and then fixing it and continuing to iterate on it until they built something that became the foundation of Olin. And even today, you continue to still evolve the curriculum, because as technology moves, you have to make sure that you're teaching people and learning in ways that's most relevant. And it's reached a point where about hundreds of colleges from all around the world now actually come to Olin, because they want both within engineering and outside engineering education, because they want to figure out how to make their own institutions relevant. And the point I'm trying to make is not to say that that's the best representation of college and education, but it is that whenever you're trying to solve any problem, you really have to go back to clearly articulate what problem you're trying to solve and who's the target audience for it. So when Olin approached engineering education, when you look at most other places, they say there aren't enough engineers in the world. And what they end up doing is finding ways to graduate thousands of people. They replicate the same process that exists today, maybe add some tech lens, but try and churn out as many people as possible. What Olin said was the reason we don't have enough engineers in the world is too focused. One is from a student perspective, it's because engineering education is just not interesting. So most people, even if they start, they drop out, or people think they can't do it. And at the same time, they're the second audience you have is companies, because you're not graduating people who are actually able to solve problems of today. And companies have to retrain people when they come in and they're not able to use the education. So that's how Olin started with defining the real problem, their target audience, and then they designed something that was compelling, interesting, and something that's becoming increasingly relevant. So personally, I think the solutions you come up with are often far easier than defining the problem. And so you really need to spend enough time drilling down and defining what your problem is in just a few words and really who the target audience is. And it's something that I've used throughout my career, whether it was at Microsoft when you're trying to figure out what features you should ship, or when I was at Headspace actually more recently, since it's a meditation app, part of it is subscription based, and we found that there were some users who were churning out early, and if you ask people, okay, why are you leaving? Some people would say it's too expensive of an app. But really, when you dig in deeper, you realize the people who thought it was too expensive were the people who weren't using the app enough. So the problem was in the solution and wasn't really to decrease the price, but it was to find ways to create habit that people were coming back to the app every day and meditating, because as long as they were using it every day, no price was too much for them to pay. So it's just a different way of just articulating the problem, really articulating the problem, so you can find the best way to solve it. And I think that, combined with basically your own unique worldview and your experiences, is what lets you build solutions that are both sticky and resilient. So with that, that's all I have for you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ananya. I think that was very well articulated. So, very, very simple stuff. Yeah, if you are able to articulate your problems properly, solutions come easy. And that's what the example she gave us. And to my mind, I think if you're articulating a problem properly is also innovation in articulation to that extent. With this, let me call on stage Shalini Chopra. Lots of insights. She's an expert at relational, strategic, tactical insights. So let's hear some insights from you.
Thank you so much. Oh my God, she described me with all those adjectives now. I hope I am able to live up to it. I'm going to change gears here. So we are in September right now, and come December, we'll see a lot of updates from a lot of travel companies about the number of long weekends that we will have in the year 2018. And people start preparing, and people are more excited about how many those numbers are. Is it better than the previous year, etc. Most of us here are from Delhi. And you would have observed that at the end, towards the end of every long weekend, the entry roads to Delhi NCR are choked, because those many hundreds and thousands of people are coming back, returning from their vacations. So the happy vacations of the long weekends. If you ask many of these people, how was it? How do you feel about it? On the day of their return, most often they'll say it was wonderful, but we get back to the grind tomorrow. What is that? You haven't even ended your holiday. Why do you need to then generate so many bills so that you have to grind yourself to generate that wealth and then go back for another vacation? It's almost like your in-between time is being used waiting for those vacations. You call it for de-stressing, rejuvenating, whatever. Let's talk of another scenario, again related to technology. Yes, as Sarika pointed, it can be a boon or a bane. Monitoring the Future is one of the organizations in the US which actually has been doing a lot of research since 1970 and has actually surveyed more than 1.4 billion adolescents or youngsters about their state of mind and overall behaviors. And they noticed that towards 2013, 12-13, this number of people, number of youngsters facing depression or who are depressed had drastically increased. What's important to note is during this time, it's not that the wealth or the family setup or the financial setup of these youngsters had deteriorated. The number of assignments or the homework, so-called pressure of the youngsters, had actually decreased. What had changed was the usage of the mobile phone, which resulted in much lesser human interactions among the age group or otherwise. That impacted the state of mind and resulted in increased numbers of depressed people or depressed youngsters. Now this is a US-based research, but India also has a similar pattern, and very soon we might catch up. Again, where is the challenge? I can give my child the jazziest, the most expensive phone or device to play with. But am I imparting or enabling the child to understand how to use that smartphone or the smart device to better his life? Without that, we are creating a big gap between wealth and wellness. Our wealth is actually contributing to decreased or deteriorating wellness. So like it was pointed initially that innovation is the most used and kind of most abused words. In my line of work, almost every year, we hear of newer jargons. The latest one doing the rounds is mindfulness. We should be mindful. We should be resilient, innovative. I am passionate. So many of us talk of, I am passionate about, say, flying or golfing, whatever, about theatre. Okay, so what do you do about it? How often do you take out time for it? Oh no, I don't have time, that's the only problem. That's not passion. That's only fashion. It's nice to mention in the WhatsApp groups. It's nice to mention on any social platform, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, Snapchat. But how has it really impacted me? I'm creating a huge conflict in my mind. Now, what is this? What am I really leading to? It's not about knowing that mindfulness is important. We all know. We know innovation is integral to any business, any entrepreneur engagement. We know positive attitude is a must-have, but how many of us really are able to conduct ourselves with that? Unless we bring in that behavioral shift in whatever we aspire to do and whatever we want to achieve, it's either zero or a half achieved goal. And based on my technology, one of the challenges is that the minute we start using jargons a lot, we convince ourselves that we know it, we've learned it, and that's where learning kind of stops. So my organization actually comes in that space where learning has been a leadership imperative for very many years, the top 3 almost, but because the ROI is not seen, they are not able to justify. Everyone knows it's important, it's integral, but it's not justifiable in the business sense. So we've introduced an innovation in the whole business engagement for behavioral learning and transformation, an ROI-based behavioral transformation which is fun, which is transformational, and which is sustainable. As a concluding note, all I would like to say is that the best of processes, the best of technology that we deploy in our lives or in the organizations we are, till there is a corresponding behavioral shift, we would not have achieved what we had set out to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalini. True to her expertise, lots of insights in what she spoke. Better tomorrow needs to be better. Is wealth really leading to better wellness? And of course, passion versus fashion. So these are interesting insights coming from her. With this, I'd like to call Aakanksha on stage, please. Yeah, well-traveled, well-lived in different parts of the world. MBA from SP Jain. So I have a colleague who's also an MBA from SP Jain. Maybe you guys can connect later.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think everybody would be really hungry right now, so I don't think I'll take a long time of yours. I think experience is the best teacher in the world. So while I was thinking of what to talk about today, I thought let me take some insights